Alrighty, you cool cats, welcome back to VelOhio. Usually I like to say that welcome to another beautiful day here in Central Ohio. Today is a little bit different because, I don't know, it's 100 degrees out. It's been 100 degrees for about a week. But regardless, this is a day that I've been looking forward to for basically a few months now, with my A priority race being the gravel triathlon national championships being held in Michigan this year. I did want to do a little bit of testing to see which wheel and tire size combination would prove to be fastest for me on race day. So a few options today. We're going to look at 40 millimeters and 45 millimeters on a 700C wheel versus a 2.1 on a 650B, which will measure out at about 53 millimeters. I do have calipers today so that we can actually verify the width of the tire, and I'm going to set all the tire pressures to the optimum category 2 gravel setting according to the Silka tire pressure guide. So we should have some pretty reliable data, even though it's not perfectly scientific. How am I going to collect this data? Well, we're going to use power today by using my Soma Cazadero, or Favero Soma, I'm not sure which is which, one-sided power meter pedals. These are from my Continental Triathlon bike. I've not actually used them on the Batelle ADD gravel bike, which does explain my ruby red road shoe selection. And that further explains my attire, why I wear all black on a 100-degree day. Well, because I'd rather look good than stay cool. And by looking good, I will be cool. So let's get into a little bit of the testing. The first test that I have in mind here may or may not have as much bearing as the second test, but we've got a pretty good hill with a maximum 11% gradient descent here leading into Batelle Darby Metro Creek Park. I'm going to be rolling down for about half of a mile, and I want to do just a simple roll down test from a standing start just to see how these tires perform on pavement. Looking into the tires a little bit more closely, we do have a Continental Terrra Speed in the 40 millimeter width. This is the fastest gravel tire that Continental makes. Pretty minimal tread, pretty minimal shoulder tread as well. I'm going to have the 700 by 42 Specialized Pathfinder Pro, which really is a favorite among the gravel racers that you'll see at things like Unbound, usually more in the 47 size. When I put these 42 millimeter tires on the G25 ICANN wheels with that 25 millimeter internal width, they are going to blow up to be about 45 millimeters. And then last, on the Pub Carbon 35 gravel wheels that are in 650B, I've got the Schwalbe Thunder Burts, which are my gravel tire of choice when it comes to the Ohio Gravel Race Series. In that 2.1 width, they're going to measure at 53 millimeters. Because the race course in Michigan is going to be far less technical than what I encountered in the Ohio Gravel Race Series, with more like 400 feet of climbing for every 10 miles instead of 1,000 feet, I'm not as concerned with kind of gnarly turns and fast ascents and maximizing my grip and puncture protection. So if there is a speed advantage to be had by going with a smaller tire, you know, on less chunky gravel, then I am willing to take it. So let's get into the testing. Let's have a little bit of fun today. This will be a decent workout going up and down this hill. I'm going to try to do 3 runs on each wheel and tire combination, and then maybe just take the median run on each, and we'll see what we see. So fortunately for me, right where the hill begins to crest here at the top, there is a share the lane bike symbol. So I'm going to put my front tire right at the arrows just to have a consistent starting point. I'm going to simply clip in, pedal backwards to get my feet level, and then I'll be off. I did see on the climb up that the maximum percentage is 9.5%, so that should be steep enough to get some speed going and probably test this bike, I don't know, up to about 28 miles an hour or so. Of course, I am going to try to keep a pretty consistent position, which means putting my hands into the drops with just a slight elbow bend and then head in a neutral posture. There is a little bit of wind today, but hopefully that's negated by doing 3 runs with each setup. Here's the first of the runs with the 700 with 40. Wish me luck. So run one down, and honestly that took me further than I thought it would. I almost ran out of runway here, but basically I made it right to this parking line, so I stuck a little chopstick in the ground. That'll be my marker for the first run. Let's do 2 more on the 40 millimeter, and then we'll try the 45s. Okay, so 3 runs down with the 40 millimeter tires on the 700C. My lowest distance was this parking line here of this parking spot. The furthest was actually the other side of that dirt path. So from min to max, about a difference of 11 yards. I'm gonna say this, you know, concrete divider into the grassy patch here would kind of be about the average. So roughly to this stop sign where the bike is propped up now, I'm going to say is where the 700 by 40 went. Little change of plans. Let's test the 650B with 53s on there next, and we'll see how the big boys do. All right, let's get those 650Bs on there. I probably didn't mention that I haven't been holding any water bottles on there because I don't want the varying bicycle weight to influence the test, but offsetting potentially a lower rolling resistance with that bigger tire, and certainly an aero penalty, I wonder if the heavier wheel is going to carry me further down the hill. I guess we'll see. Oh, it's getting hot. If nothing else, it's a lot quieter. Wheel and tire combination number 2 here. We've got the 650B by 2.1. Let's see how the big boys roll. So a clean run that time, but still about 8 or 9 parking spots shorter than the 700 by 40. Are we really surprised about that? Probably not. I'm seeing a higher top speed, about 32 miles an hour with this. Maybe that is from the additional weight just coming down the hill. But I think, you know, these tires are rolling at 23 PSI instead of 37. And that wider width at those higher speeds, I think is just ultimately slowing me down. So far, 700 by 40 in the roll down test for the win. All right, time has come to roll out on the Specialized Pathfinder Pros. These are 700 by 42, but on these wide internal width rims, they are coming in at 44 millimeters. Are we gonna split the difference between the fatties and the skinnies? I guess we'll see. So 3 runs in on the Pathfinder. Surprisingly, we're about 11 spots shy of where the Terrra Speeds were, so pretty similar outcomes to what we had with the Thunder Burts. I thought this would actually split the difference. Maybe just that's what I was thinking because it splits the size difference, but I guess that can come down to the sidewall compliance as well. Okay guys, welcome to our second test, and this test has me a bit more excited than that simple roll down test that we did before, because this is where the rubber specifically meets the road, specifically meets the gravel. So you saw how the 3 tires performed in that roll down test, but we're just north of Darby Farm, and we're actually on what's called the Darby Dan horse race course. It is a retired horse race course that is a, you know, perfect oval if there is such a thing, but it measures 1.08 miles around. When I was out here last week, I did a KOM attempt on it and got 4th place. I was about 4 miles an hour faster than my previous attempt, which tells me 2 things. My bike is optimized for gravel compared to what I used before. I think I was on my cross bike with like a 32 millimeter, but also that the gravel conditions here can vary. So when I want to do this test, I'm going to do 5 laps around. I'm going to try to hold a consistent power of about 215 watts, which is right in the middle of my tempo. I'm going to hold the inside lane for 2 laps. That's going to be the smoothest. I'm going to hold the middle ridge where a lot of the riff-raff and loose gravel collects. That'll be the roughest part, 2 laps of that. And then I want to ride the outside perimeter where it's just a bit deeper and sandier. So here's our smooth inner line. We've got the chunkier center section where some of the bigger stones collect. And then I'm just going to ride kind of in the dry grass, a bit in the deeper section here on that last lap. Of course, we do have wind today. This is not a perfectly scientific test, but I think if I do 5 laps at consistent power, it can just help us clear some of that statistical noise. And I do think that this will be a more accurate representation of what I can expect on race day in Michigan from these 3 different tires. So our first contender, we've got the Schwalbe Thunder Burt and a 2.1. I've got 23 PSI in the front, 24 PSI in the back. I'm running Kenda butyl inner tubes on all 3 tires. Of course, I'll set them up tubeless for race day, but just out of convenience, yeah, we're all using the same brand of butyl rubber inner tube for today. One seeming disadvantage of this wheel set versus the 700C is that it is only 35 millimeters deep compared to the 50. Now, while that might be true, we do have to consider one of the reasons that a deep dish wheel is helpful is because of how it shortens the length of the spoke. Because this is a 650B wheel, the fact that it only has a 35 millimeter deep section actually means that the spoke length is the same between the 650B and the 700. So that egg beater dynamics will be the same across both wheel sets. One downside, however, of course, is that I'm going to have a bit more overhang of the tire on this 32 millimeter external width than I will on the narrower tire with the 34 external width on the 700. And these do have round steel spokes as opposed to the Sapum CX Rays bladed spokes on the 700. These are technically a lightweight cross-country mountain bike tire, but they still roll excellently for gravel. And like I said, these were my tire of choice last year for the Ohio Gravel Race Series. So let's tear up 5 laps here, and then we'll move on to the 700C wheel set. Okay, so test circuit number 1 is done. 650B by 2.1s. I looked at the lap time, it was about 13:56. I did 4 laps, 2 on the smooth line and 2 on the rough line. I abandoned the 5th lap. I didn't think that outside line was going to really give me anything different. That central line was rough enough for me to, I think, accurately represent a rough gravel road. Ride feel felt really good. I mean, it felt a little bit like overkill when I was on the smooth, you know, and really comfortable, but probably don't need all that. On the central section, you know, there would be some good 8, 9, 10 millimeter stones that I think are going to buck the bike a little bit when I put these 40s on, but I can just hold that line without even really needing to think about it and just kind of float on top. So we'll see how the 40s do. There's no braking, there's no real turning. This is basically a gravel velodrome, so there are aspects of the 40s versus 53s that might shine in those circumstances, but we'll see. So yeah, let's get a precise measurement here. 52.6. And not many people know this, but you can measure the temperature with this as well. And yeah, it's 109 right now. All right, we've got the Terrra Speeds back on, measuring up. Let's see, 39.9, let's see. Yeah, 39.9, call it, yeah, 40.2. I've got 35 PSI in the front, 37 in the rear. What do you guys think from an aesthetics perspective? I mean, the other wheel set I think looks a little meaner. This one looks a little cleaner. All right, test loop number 2 coming up. And I would say initially, I could feel vibration in this smooth section that I really couldn't feel before. Those bigger tires just really nerfed it. So this feels fast. And it very well may be faster. We just don't know yet. Decision making is relative to your intended race speed. If you think you're going to be doing, you know, over 17, 18, that's when your prevailing impediment to speed is going to be wind resistance. So I've got 3 millimeters of overhang on either side of this 50 millimeter deep 700C wheel, as opposed to the 10 millimeters on each side. Now, they say every 4 millimeters costs you about a watt. So I guess I'm looking at about, I don't know, 4 watt, 3 watt, 4 watt aero penalty. And then you add in these bladed spokes in the deeper rim section, which is maybe negated by the shorter spokes on the 650B. That 650B is also going to drop my bottom bracket, putting my body closer to the ground. Overall, a lower frontal area. It's a lot to unpack. In these laps, I think I'm averaging about 18 miles an hour, so I'm right at that threshold where my main consideration should be aerodynamics. I've been riding a consistent position on the drops with nearly straight elbows, but that speed would pick up once I get into that, you know, faux aero bar, aero hoods position on race day. So this is ridiculous, and this is going to cut the test short on us, but the valve stem cap has become twisted shut within that valve extender. And this is not the type that you can untwist and pull through the rim, because it's actually thicker on the other side, so it won't pull through. So I guess for one thing, I'm not going to be able to mount up the Pathfinders to do the actual gravel test, but I'm also not sure how I'm going to untwist that valve stem cap so that I could let the air out. I mean, I could puncture the tire and puncture the tube and then remove it and then boot the tire, but that sounds a little extreme and destructive. I did test the large end of the spectrum and the narrow end of the spectrum, so at least we're going to get some test results there, and maybe we can infer what would have happened in the middle at 45 millimeters. But I think what we have to do is probably take the Champion from today and then repeat this testing process up against the 45 millimeter as measured Pathfinders. So this video is going to have to conclude on another day. Well, welcome back to VelOhio, and welcome back to, I guess, 3 weeks from where I left off. I hope you all have had a nice 3-week hiatus here from this video. Happy 4th of July and all that stuff. I think I've generated as many new problems as I generated solutions. I did manage to get home, kind of lubricate that valve extender, and then reach in with some tweezers to undo the valve stem, you know, little cap there, to deflate the tire and then swap over. So what do we have on the docket today, on the agenda for today? I do now have the Specialized Pathfinders, the Pros, mounted up. They were 700 by 42, but on this internal width, they're a bit wider at 25 millimeters internally. So they're measuring up right at 44. There we go, 44 on the button. According to the Silka tire pressure calculator, I should be running 33 in the rear and 31 PSI in the front today, so that's what I've gone with. So because it's been 3 weeks, I know the outcome of those Continental Terrra Speeds versus the Schwalbe Thunder Burts, and because it's 3 weeks later, course conditions might be different, weather conditions, different time of day, different humidity. Certainly the scientific validity is out the window. So I have 3 tires to run today. It's kind of a battle of the tan walls. I wanted to bring back a different tire in that 650B, but we'll talk about that later. But I think what I have to do is same protocol, same type of run, you know, 2 laps on the smooth, 2 laps on the rough. I averaged 209 watts exactly on my previous 2 runs, so that's what I'm going to try to shoot for today. We'll get a time with the Pathfinder Pros, but since I can't compare apples to 3 weeks ago, then I'm going to mount the Terrra Speeds again, do that run, and use that as today's baseline. And then at least from 3 weeks ago and today, I can measure the other tires as compared to the Continental Terrra Speeds. And hopefully what we'll have at the end of all this is a comparison, 40 millimeters, 44, 48, and 53. And it's gonna give us an answer of what I should run on race day. So anyway, 4 laps, roughly 15 minutes. Let's get to work. So 4 laps down, 1 run down on the Specialized Pathfinder Pros. They felt pretty good. The time was 13 and change, just like the other runs. I don't know exactly how fast it was. And I don't know how my power compares. I don't think I'm the best at pacing these exactly, but I was trying to hold 209, just that left-sided only power meter. You kind of go like 180, 240, 180, 240, and it tries to double it for you, but it's up to you to average it out. Subjectively, they feel really kind of plump and cushy on the smooth stuff, you know, probably overkill. And then besides the big chunk, they just kind of bashed on through the middle line. So I don't know, it'll be interesting to see. What do you guys think of the tan wall aesthetic? I couldn't do it on road. I think on gravel, it's acceptable. Well, I never get sick of this. Switchy, swappy, flippy, floppy. I don't think I'll bore you guys with any other footage of me retesting this, but like I said, this is just to get the baseline with the Conti so that we can do a mildly closer scientific comparison. At least the good news is that I got the tire off. So anyway, it's a good excuse to do some tempo intervals. I'll see you after this run. So control run done on the Contis. It'll be interesting to see how my power was today versus the first day and see if there's any variability in the time. We've had some rain in the last 3 weeks that sort of just spread the heavy rocks out a little bit more, so I'd say if anything it's a little bit rougher today than it was last time. On the easy sections, the smooth sections, these tires feel better than the Specialized because they're just as smooth, but they don't give you that kind of tractor type feeling, the vertical whoa, 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 whoa. So it felt very efficient, just straight horizontal energy. Excuse me. But then that last quarter of the lap, it's pretty rough. So I mean, you're definitely chopping around, getting bounced around a bit. It makes me think of that descent before the second big climb at Black Fork, where the volunteers are kind of waving you like, stop, stop, you gotta take a turn. Because when you come down that, it's really rough and rutted. A lot of people drop their chains there. Me, I would not want to be taking that descent on these tires, trying to keep grip, you know, through that chattery section and into a high-speed turn like that. So I think irrespective of my findings on flat ground, it's not really going to change my mind on what I should be running in Ohio gravel. But I was looking at the race course for Michigan. Over 29 miles, there are like 13 turns, and they're all 90 degree. And there's only, I don't know, it's like 1,800 feet of climbing, 1,200 feet of climbing or something. So from what I can tell in scouting and from what I can tell in the race videos, this Darby Dan track is a pretty good approximation. Alrighty, so one more run to go, and I'm actually pretty pleased about that. My wild card here, my ace in the hole, since I had to come back to do the second set of testing anyway, I wanted to do one more tire size just to kind of round out the data. But this is a tire that I've had my eye on for ages. I remember this being Cross Magazine or Gravel Magazine, one of those kind of early on the scene cyclocross gravel websites voted this as their mixed terrain tire of the year. This would have been in like 2017, so I guess right at the start of the gravel boom. But it's the Soma Cazadero. It came out in this 650B by 50 several years after the original 40 millimeter version, and thankfully it's now in a tubeless casing. It measures up right now at 48 millimeters, so that's going to give us some nice kind of rounded out data. 40 to 44 to 48 to 53, you know, nearly 4 millimeter increments. It does have a good supple sidewall and a really interesting tread pattern, like an elevated smooth central ridge that a lot of tires have adopted, but it's not just smooth, it's also elevated. After you get off to the side of that, you get into sort of intermediate shoulder lugs, and then you get into some pretty significant shoulder lugs here. How is it going to compare? I think my guesses are out the window at this point. I hope I can just get some consistent power down so that we can get some nice clean data to work with. But yeah, revenge of the tan walls today. All right, so there we go, 48.2. I've got 28 PSI in the front and 29 in the rear. Let's see what the Soma Cazaderos can do. They're actually produced by Panaracer for Soma in Japan. So just riding back to the track, this is an unexpected finding. These Cazaderos are flinging bits of rock and gravel into my frame like it's being sandblasted. So I'm not sure what I think about that. Well, I'm sure that I don't like it. Yeah, I might need some extra frame protection if I'm gonna stick with these. Okay, so all the test runs done and dusted. The Soma Cazaderos felt perfectly good. They felt really planted, you know, secure. My suspicion is that all that energy cost of ripping dirt and rocks off the ground and up into my frame is actually going to cost it a little bit straight line speed. But for other courses where, you know, traction is at a premium, I'm even considering kind of monster cross conditions, more like, you know, deep mud. These might be the tire of choice. They felt a lot like Pathfinders, except that they were grippier. One noticeable difference going to these is how much lower you feel on the bicycle. You know, going from a 44 on 700 to a 47 on 650B. These probably have a similar total diameter to like a 25 millimeter tire on a 700, you know, like a time trial tire. So the whole bike drops to the ground, which again might actually be a good thing when you're looking to make gains in the cornering department. Maybe not so much for this race, but I'm going to go ahead and wrangle the data. I'm taking off tomorrow for North Carolina, so I'm going to have some time to put the videos together and edit them. So next time I see you, maybe I'll be lakeside. All right. So as you can probably tell from the length of my beard, more time has passed than just simply into the weekend on my vacation. I decided to treat my vacation like a vacation and didn't get around to any recording. But yeah, I just finished up some running intervals on the track. The good news and the bad news about having a track about a third mile away is that there's really no excuse to performing your intervals, but then there's no excuse, so I get them done. So I just did 12 by 400 meters at 90 seconds on 90-second rest interval, and the training seems to be coming along well, so happy with the fitness. But that's not what we're talking about in this video, so let's get through results. Because I had to do the testing on 2 different days, all of our results are going to be in reference to the time of the Terrra Speed. So fortunately, between day 1 and day 2, across about the 14 minutes or so, plus or minus, time of the Terrra Speed, there was less than a 10-second difference between them. Slower on the second day, which I think actually makes sense because that smoother line was a little bit rougher. After the rain, the rocks were just a little bit more evenly distributed. So the rougher line was still rough, that smoother line was just a little bit rougher. And then you could probably argue it was earlier in the day, a little bit cooler, so more dense air, and I would have been going more slowly. So we'll go from slowest to fastest. So bringing up the rear, that would be in 4th place, the 48 millimeter Soma Cazadero. That was 15 seconds slower than the Terrra Speed over the course of those 14 minutes. If we extrapolate that over the course of what I'm expecting to be about an hour and 45 minutes of riding time at the Gravel National Championships for triathlon, that would put you about a minute and a half back. Why is that the case? Well, we could think of a reduced suppleness to the sidewall perhaps, but also just the way that that tread pattern was like excavating the earth and just kicking up rocks and debris into my down tube. I mean, all that energy is coming from somewhere. It has to go somewhere. It was going into the rocks and probably not into my forward momentum. In 3rd place, and the one that I was really holding out hope for, was my Schwalbe Thunder Burt. That was 11 seconds slower over the 14. So if we extrapolate that again, that's going to be about a minute and 17 seconds slower than our fastest tire. So in second place, getting the silver, we have the Specialized Pathfinder Pro in the 42 millimeter. That was 6 seconds slower, 42 seconds slower over the 29 miles. And then the champion, the narrowest tire at 40 millimeters, we do have the Continental Terrra Speed, which, like I said, was just about within 10 seconds on each day. Now, why do I think that's the case? Why do we have the order that we have here? In this somewhat category 2 gravel, if we think about it in, from 1 to 4, 1 being just basically dirt hard pack, 4 being very rocky, just basically bordering on single track conditions. This was, on the smoother side of gravel. At the wattage that I was producing and the speeds I was traveling, roughly 19 miles per hour across all 4 tires, between 19.2 and 18.9. Aerodynamics will be your primary restriction to forward progress. So that width of tire, narrow as aero, mated to that wide 700C rim with a 50 millimeter depth and aero bladed spokes. I mean, it's really horses for courses. This was a fast track with very low technical requirements to it, and you can just put on smooth, consistent power. And I really think that's why in this experiment, the 40 and the 44 millimeter tires were fastest. Now, when it was time to get fat, perhaps you have to get really fat. So the 53 Thunder Burt was faster than the 48 Cazadero. In all fairness, that Thunder Burt is an all-out XC race tire, whereas the Cazadero is more of a multi-purpose tire, and that could have influenced the results as well. Now, I do believe that if conditions were different, so if we take any of the 5 to 6 hour Ohio Gravel Race Series events where I was averaging more like 13 to 14 miles an hour, there were sections of single track, there are bombing descents at 40, 45 miles an hour where you might bottom out on a pothole or something like that, or a rut. I do think that it still makes sense for my tire selection last year to have gone fatter. Over the course of the almost 500 miles of racing and all of those training miles in between, I never had a flat or a problem with those Thunderburts. Now, with such a narrow difference between the Pathfinder Pro and the Terra Speed, only 6 seconds over those 14 minutes, there's some argument there that I should perhaps just go with the more puncture resistant tire, which in this case, according to Bicycle Rolling Resistance, is that Specialized Pathfinder Pro. The reason that I'm not going to do that is that I'm going to call back to the results of that roll down test, where the Pathfinder Pro and the Thunder Burt were 11 parking spaces short of the Terra Speed. The first 10% of this course, and then again after you loop around, the last 10%, so of course 20% of this course is actually going to be paved. So I want to be as efficient and fast as I can be even on those paved sections. So happy to see that the Terra Speed is faster on gravel, but according to those roll down tests, it's undoubtedly faster on pavement. So in this instance, choosing a fast tire versus choosing the slowest tire is going to save you about 90 seconds over this particular course. Now, is 90 seconds going to make or break the podium for you? I guess that depends on who else shows up. I mean, I will personally take those 90 seconds any day of the week. That's the whole reason that I did this experiment. But another way to think about this, we've got the 5K run, the 29-mile bike, and then the 10K run. Given the fact that it's a trail run, off-road conditions, if we just assume like an 8-minute mile over this final 10K, the slowest tire versus the fastest tire is equivalent to running 14 seconds slower per mile if you were to choose that slow tire. So I could even be putting out the same wattage, saving all that time and just conserving my energy, and then be able to run faster in the second 10K. That's worth it to me any day of the week. My other big takeaway from this is that all of the tires felt different. They give you different feedback. So depending on what you might feel most comfortable with, what's going to inspire confidence for you when you're bombing down the straightaways or you're, trying to take some high-speed turns. If this was, anything muddier, you know, closer to a cyclocross course, I don't think I'd be going with something like that Terra Speed. In fact, that Cazadero seems like it'd be a really good option in the way that it grips and cuts and tractions itself into the dirt. So I think that rider feedback portion is pretty important. Now, I'm not too concerned about the technical nature of this course in Michigan, so the name of the game is all out speed, and that's why after this experiment, I'm definitely going with the Continental Terra Speed. I hope you guys enjoyed this not quite so scientific test, but I am happy to see that the results are grouped closely enough for them to make sense, but not so close that they're, you know, within experimental error. So if you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know if you want me to test any other gear for you, and I'll get around to it in the next one. Thanks a lot.